So we will be building a GitHub AI agent in this particular community call. You just need to pass the context related to the issue to the agent, and it will create a properly formatted GitHub issue along with the relevant assignees and labels to the issue. It will also notify you via email or Slack based on whatever you have configured. So let me walk you through the agenda of this call. So we will start with the quick overview of the GitHub agent, where I will explain you the flowchart of what all components are needed in order to build this entire agentic workflow of the agent. Then we'll start building the agent from scratch. We'll start with the quick demo of how it works, and then we'll be creating the RAG pipeline inside of the ToolJet Workflows, and then we'll integrate that agentic pipeline to the AI chat component in the app builder. And then lastly, we will set up the Slack or SMTP as a notification once the GitHub issue is created. And then we'll end the call with the closing remarks. So here is the quick flowchart of the agent that we are going to build today. So user will be inputting the context related to the issue inside of the chat component of ToolJet. So as you can see in the flowchart, the user enters the issue context, and then the chat component will trigger the ToolJet workflow, where it will take the issue context to the agentic workflow pipeline, and this pipeline will create the issue for you. I'll show you the details of how the ToolJet workflows work exactly. But this workflow basically gets all the context, prepares the GitHub issue, and then creates the issue and send the relevant details of created issue to the user back on the chat component. And then via chat component, we will sending the notification of the created issue to the user. So once we get the issue context from the chat component in the app builder, we will pass that context to the vector database. So we have set up a Weaviate vector database which has all the chunks of ToolJet's documentation. So this will give us all the relevant information which will help us to get more context over the issue and take the right decisions of adding proper labels or add the proper format. Then we pass all the data to the OpenAI, which will take all the decisions related to the type of the issue. Is it a bug? Is it a feature? Is it related to a particular team? Is it related to a particular assignee? And finally, we'll pass the response from OpenAI to the REST API, which will help us to create the GitHub issue. Once the workflow is completed, as I shown in the last slide, it will go back to the user to send the notifications of the created issue. Now let me show you a quick demo of how the agent works exactly. So we have this chat component which is connected with a set of queries which will help us to trigger the workflow and send notifications to Slack and SMTP. So if you go to queries, you can see we have a bunch of OpenAI queries which is helping us to format response for each of email and Slack. Also it helps us format the response for the chat also, and this is where we trigger the workflow. We are using webhook for the trigger. And if I show you the workflow, so this is how the workflow looks like. Initially we start with querying the context of an issue from our Weaviate vector database, which has all the data related to our documentation. Then we next go to frame the content, then we sanitize the response, and then we create an issue with the REST API for GitHub, and then send back the response to the app builder here, through which we can further share the response in respective channels. So yeah, this is how it works. Now let me quickly show you a demo. So let's say if I click on this, this is the context for the issue, and I want this agent to create an issue for me. Now first it will trigger the workflow, and workflow will create an issue, and then it will fetch back the data and it will show me here. All right, cool, everything is successful. Now if I click on this, you can see this is the issue. Now it seems like this is a feature. Relevant assignee has been also assigned it. So if you see, it has added a relevant title. The body of the issue has been properly formatted. We are also adding relevant labels, and you can see assignee is also assigned. Now if I go to the emails, you can see I've got an email, that issue has been created. If I go to the Slack message, you can see the Slack message of the same where issue has been created successfully, and I can go to the issue from here itself. So yeah, this is what we are going to build. So let's jump onto the building part of this agent. So right now we have the simple header container and a simple chat component, which doesn't do anything as of now because we haven't configured it right now. Also, if you go to queries, there are no queries attached to any component as of now. That's what we are going to build in today's call. We'll be building this GitHub issue agent where you can pass the issue context in the chat component. It will trigger the workflow, and then later on we'll configure the notifications like SMTP for sending the emails. So the core part of the entire building process is the workflows. So we'll be creating the agentic workflow inside of the ToolJet Workflows, and then we'll be triggering that workflow from this chat component, which will get us the details of the created GitHub issue, which is created inside of the workflow. Okay, so yeah, now let's move to the workflow part. So this is the ToolJet Workflows where we'll be creating the agentic pipeline in order to get the context from the chat component, and then we'll be using the Weaviate DB, which has all the chunks of our documentation, and then we'll get the context from the Weaviate DB and we'll pass all the information to the LLM, which is OpenAI that we're using, and that will help us take all the decisions related to the relevant labels, relevant assignees, and also the type of issue we want to create. Is it a bug or if it is a feature? All those decisions will be made by LLM, and then we'll be passing the formatted content or the data to the REST API for creating the GitHub issue. So yeah, let's begin with making this a webhook. So you can go here and turn on the webhook, and we'll add a parameter to get the issue data. Okay, and yeah, now let's make our first node, which will be a REST API to do the similarity search in the vector database, which is Weaviate in our case. So this will be a post call. This is the URL that I have for my cloud account. Let me show you from where you can get it. If you go to the cluster details for your Weaviate account, you'll find a REST endpoint over here. Just copy that. That's what we are using in our workflow. And then we'll be adding headers. First will be the content type as application JSON. Second will be the OpenAPI key. Here is its value. Last is the authorization key, and here I can paste the authorization key. This you can again find in the Weaviate account. So if you go to Weaviate cluster details, here you'll find your API keys. If you do not have, you can create one from here. Alright, now we'll go to body. Since this will be a GraphQL query, we'll be passing a raw JSON for this GraphQL query. So this is how the structure looks like, and here we are passing the parameter that we created for webhook, where I'll get all the context which the user has passed in the chat component over here, and based on that it will look into the ToolJet doc chunks that we have uploaded in our vector database, and it will get us all the details. I've added the limit as 3, and we just want the URL, title, and the content for the chunk. I'll rename this node to query docs. Now in order to test this, we need to add a test parameter over here. So just to give you more context, I'm building this GitHub agent for ToolJet. So everything, all the context, all the queries that I'll be putting over here will be of ToolJet. So let me pass the issue data parameter. Okay, it will be issue underscore data, and here you can pass the context of that particular issue. And now let's try this out. I'll just run the workflow, and there we go. We got the data, and we are getting 3 items over here: related to the query that I asked. Okay, so this again will be going in the context to the LLM. So yeah. So now the next node that I want to create is for OpenAI, which will help us to make all the decisions and formatting for the GitHub issue. So I'll just pull a node. Let me just adjust it over here first. Okay. And this will be an OpenAI query. Make sure you have configured this data source first. It will be chat. Model will be 4 and max token will be 1500. Okay, so here is where all the magic lies. So I have to write a detailed prompt on what exactly that needs to be done based on the issue data context and also the context that we are getting from the documentation with the help of the Weaviate vector database. So I have already framed the prompt for this. Let me quickly walk you through you all with that prompt. So here goes the prompt. Let me give you a quick overview of what exactly it is. So what basically we are doing here is we are getting the data from the chat component in the app builder. So here is where we are passing the data. Considering that all the issues that we will be creating are some issues created by the users or our internal team on our Slack channels. So the user will be copying that the issue data from the Slack. So I have written this particular prompt in that manner. Issue context will be given from Slack and here is the Slack message that basically indicates the data that we are getting from the chat component in the app builder. The first step is to determine whether it is a bug or a feature or enhancement. Second step is to add a relevant template. If it is a bug, it has a particular template. If it is a feature request, it also has a template. And if it is an enhancement, it also has a template. All right. Now the step 3 is to give the solution right into the issue if it is already available inside of our documentation, and that's the reason we're querying the documentation. If the solution already exists and is solvable via documentation, we will pass it over here and we'll also write the same inside of the GitHub issue. Step 4 is to categorize the issue or a bug on an enhancement. That is whether it belongs to a particular team. In ToolJet we have 3 teams. First is the app builder, which is taking care of visual editor where you drag and drop and build your applications. Second is the marketplace, which is taking care of all the data sources. And third is the platform, which takes care of the SSO, user and other platform related issues. And eventually we want to add a relevant tag based on the issue where it belongs to. And lastly, we will output a JSON which will be passing in the REST API for the GitHub issue creation. Okay, so this is how the prompt looks like. And let's test this prompt out. Let me just quickly check if everything is correct. Here is where we are passing the parameter, and then we just want to check if I'm passing the docs correctly. Yes, query docs, and yeah, everything looks good to me. So let's quickly run this. All right, it's successful. And if you see the output, okay, we're getting this JSON string which has the data for our GitHub issue. All right, now next is we want to sanitize the data, because if you see, expand this, and if you see the output, we have these we have this format where it includes JSON as a string inside of the response that we're getting from OpenAI, which we do not want. So we'll be cleaning this up with the help of JavaScript. So let me collapse this and open run.js, and let me name this as sanitize. And here, now let me also rename the OpenAI node to frame content. Okay, and let's just structure it well so it looks nice. All right, cool. Now we'll go to sanitize, and here we'll be getting the data from OpenAI node first, like this. Now we'll replace the structure that we don't want with an empty string like this, and it will return the raw text later. Let's try this now. Alright, we are getting the sanitized data. If you see, it is a JSON string now. Alright, now the last step is to create a REST API which will create the issue. So this will be a post call, and here is where we are passing the URL for GitHub. So based on whatever repository that you are using, you can use that particular URL. So if you see, I'm using my own repository. The name of the repository is Slack itself. So this is how the repository looks like. It has a bunch of issues, and this is where the created issue will be showing up later. So let's go to the workflow again. In headers, let's pass the authorization first. Here goes the value. Then we need to pass accept and the value. Now in body, we need to pass all the details which are sanitized after getting response from OpenAI. So we'll click on draw, and in this body we'll be just passing this data, where we are just passing the sanitized data, and this is how it looks like. Right now I'm just assigning it to myself, and yeah. Now let's try to test this out. Before we test it out, we need to add a response so that it can give the response to the webhook as well. It will be response. Let's rename this first. Create issue. Okay. Now in response, we'll just return the output, and output will be whatever we are getting from the create issue node. Now let's quickly test this out. We already have the test issue data. If you go to issues, and you can see the issue number 55 is the last one created yesterday. And if I run this now, alright, it is successful. If you see the response node, we are getting the data, and this is the data related to the created GitHub issue. If I go to issues and if I refresh, you can see we just created a new issue, which is a feature on platform. If you click on it, these are all the feature request details. So yeah, this is how you can create the agentic workflows inside of the ToolJet Workflows. Now we want to get this data inside of our chat component in the app builder. So let's go back to the app builder now. So we want to trigger the workflow from the chat component, but we also have to make sure that we pass the relevant data to the workflow. For that, the first step would be to sanitize the data that we are getting from this particular chat component, and then we'll be passing the sanitized data to the workflow, and we'll do the further process after that. So let's go to queries, and here we can add an OpenAI query. Okay, you can select the operation as chat model, and then tokens will be 1500. So in message, we'll just pass this prompt, that is sanitize and improve the data. We need to remove all the codes, and we need to format it in a way that we can pass it as a parameter to the webhook for triggering the workflow. And here we are just passing the content from the chat component. Okay, all right, so let's try to add some content and check if this works well. Now let's rename this to sanitize input. All right, cool. Now here is where we pass the issue context. So this is the issue context, and here we'll be adding an event that on message sent we want to trigger the query that we just created to sanitize the input. And yeah, so as soon as you hit enter, I believe that query should run, and it is completed. If you go to queries, you'll see the input and you'll see the output data as well. All right, Cool. So if you run this again, you can see this is how the output data looks like after the sanitization. This is required especially when you have a lot of characters added inside of your input prompt. So yeah, so from this particular query we want to trigger another query to trigger the workflow, and before we do that we need to create that query first. So we'll go to REST API, and here we'll just rename this to trigger workflow, and we'll make this a post request, and you can get the URL from the workflow. So you can go to workflow, go here, go to webhook, and copy this, copy the URL, and go back to app builder and paste it over here. All right, now next in headers we'll just pass the content type as application JSON, and then authorization as the API token for this webhook. So we need to get that from here. Just copy the API token, and here you just write bearer and just pass the value. Alright, so we are done setting up the REST API, and in body we'll pass the issue data that we're getting from the sanitize input query. So we'll go to raw and just pass it over here. Alright, so I believe we are ready to trigger the workflow from our app builder. So we already have this data, so you can directly run this, and if it runs successfully it will give us the GitHub issue data which we are getting. If you see the output, so this is newly created GitHub issue. If I go to GitHub issues, if I go to issues, you can see this is something that we just created. And yeah, now this is the data that we are going to use in order to show back inside of our chat component, and also to send notifications via email. Now we can go back to the first query, and here we will trigger this on success of this query. You can just run the query, select trigger workflow, and in trigger workflow we just want to show the details back, but we want to show the nicely formatted content on the chat component. So we'll again use OpenAI to format the data, but we also want to notify that the issue has been created. So we can go to settings, add a new event handler, and here we'll just do control component, choose the chat component, and action will be append history. And here we'll just add an object with message key and the type response key, something like this, where in message we say GitHub issue has been created successfully and fetching its details, and the type is response. So once you do that, it will send the details back to the chat. So now we want to do a set of things next. First is we want to format the response, and we want to send it back to the chat component, and also then we want to notify about the issue creation via SMTP. In order to format these responses, we'll be using OpenAI again. So the first thing is we want to format the response for chat component. So we'll just go ahead and add OpenAI, go to setup, chat, GPT-4, and max token as 1500. And here you need to pass the message. That is the prompt for formatting the response for chat component. So this is the prompt that I created, where we just want to mention that just give us the link to the newly created issue, and also format it in the markdown format and make it short and crisp. Okay, and then I will just pass the response that I'm getting from the webhook API. All right, cool. So once this is done triggering, we need to pass it back to the chat component. Before that, let me just rename this query to format a response. Now I'll go to settings, and here add an event handler, add action as control component, and append history as the action. Here again we need to pass the formatted data with the type response, and we can do it like this. You just need to pass data from the query and as type response on successfully execution of this particular query. Okay, now next, after this, we want to send an email about creation of this new issue. So for that, we have to do two things. We need to create an SMTP query, which will be used to send the email. And also before sending the email, we want to format the response in email format. For that, again, we'll be using the OpenAI query. So let me add one more query. Okay, go to setup, chat, model, and max token. Draft a prompt for the same. This is the prompt that I have created, which says that you just need to format it properly for the email and have passed the data that we are getting from the trigger workflow query. Let me rename this query. Now we just need to create SMTP query, change the name to send email, and in from I'll just add my email. Then in from name, I'll just add Pritesh as my name. Into again, I'll add the same email, and last is the subject and the body. For subject, I'll be taking the title from the webhook response. So let me update the subject, and then in the body, we just need to pass the formatted response that we are getting from format email query. So now let's chain all of these queries. So last query we added was the trigger workflow, and on this we have added an event for adding the message of issue creation on the chat component. But after that, we want to run format response query. So we'll just go ahead and run the format response query. Okay, now if you go to format response query, here we already have one event for updating the formatted response in the chat component, but after this we want to send an email as well. So we'll be adding one query to run the format email content. Okay, and one to notify on UI about the process of sending email. So again, go to control component, chat, and append history. Just pass the message as sending email to show the process of sending an email. Next, if you go to format email content, here we just need to run the send email query. And if you go to send email, here just we need to notify that email has been sent on the chat component. So you can go to add new event handler, again go to control component and select chat one, and action as append history, and add the message here as email sent. Alright, so this is done now. Now similar to SMTP, we can also configure a Slack notification whenever the issue is created. So for that also, we need to create two more queries. One is for formatting the response for Slack, and second is to send the Slack notification. So we can click on add and add OpenAI. Operation is chat, tokens are 1500, and here just need to add the email. Let me change the name first, and here let me add the message now, so I can enter my prompt here. As you can see, I just want to format it properly, which includes the Slack, which includes the GitHub link of the newly created issue, and it should be short and Slack friendly. Okay, cool. So this is the prompt for formatting Slack response. Now let us create a Slack query to send a Slack message. Let me rename this to send Slack message. Operation will be send message, and here you need to mention the channel ID. So for example, if I go to my Slack channel, if you go to GitHub issues, this is a channel I want to add my issues to. There is a Slack channel ID at the bottom. Just copy this, go back to the app builder and paste it over here, and here you just pass the message that you want to send, and in our case it is format Slack content.data. All right, cool. So this is done, and now let's add this. Now let's add these two queries in the trigger chain, similar to what we did for SMTP. So lastly, we were sending the email, right? And here after this, we need to add one more message in the chat of sending Slack message. So let's do that. Click on event handler, change this to component and chat and append history. Okay, and in message we will be adding this sending Slack message, and then we'll also be triggering the query of format Slack content. All right, this is done. Let me rearrange this. All right, cool. Now once the format Slack content is triggered, next we want to trigger the Slack send message. So I'll just go here and run query. The query is send Slack message, and now let's go to send Slack message, and here we just finally send the response back to the chat. Okay, again it will be control component, in here chat and append history, and here just enter the message as Slack message sent and type response. All right, so we are done with the entire workflow of the GitHub agent, and now it's time to test the agent. And before we start testing this particular agent, we also want to add loading state, so that every time a particular set of query loads, we want to show a loading over here, something similar to this. You can see the response loading state, and this we want to run on every query so that it looks good on UI. So we'll change this to fx and add our loading states. So every time all these queries are in loading, it will show a loading state on the UI. Now let me add the context for the issue. Here we have also mentioned the version of ToolJet in which the customer is facing issue, and we want to create a GitHub issue for the same. All right, now let me enter. Okay, it is loading. Okay, GitHub issue is created, and I can view the issue over here. It is sending me the email has been sent. It is sending me the Slack message, and Slack message has been sent. Now let's check out all of these one by one. So if I go here and if I open, the issue has been created, title is there, version is there, it is showing in which area, it is showing in which part of the tool the issue is, if it is a feature or a bug, and how to reproduce them and everything. So this is something that we do in the prompt for LLM. Now if I go to my emails, I can see that there is an email over here which shows me that it has been created. Now if I go to Slack, you can see the issue has been created, and it is the same issue of date range picker. All right, so this is how you can create different sort of agents inside of ToolJet by using ToolJet Workflows. I hope you liked the video, and thanks for watching till the end. We'll be coming up with more videos related to how you can build agents in ToolJet, and see you in the next community call.